An international controversy has erupted over an Ohio doctor who is scheduled to give a series of talks to concerned parents in Australia. The topic, vaccines. You may remember Dr. Sherri Tenpenny. Yes, the doctor who was targeted by the United Nations as a leading influencer, arguing that vaccines cause brain injury. Well, groups are now calling for her visa to be revoked, and venues are pulling out to prevent her from speaking about vaccines in Australia. The Guardian reports a Sydney venue has canceled her seminar. WA Today says her tour is in jeopardy. The Daily Telegraph writes that the pro-vaccine lobby is fighting to stop her. Even the Health Minister, Jill Hennessy, has come out and called for organizers to cancel her. To make her case, she took to the airwaves on the Australian Today show. And now, to discuss the attempts to silence her, she joins us on WHDT. Dr. Tenpenny, welcome to the program.
Me.
Doctor, before we get into the vaccine debate, I understand you're about to rack up a lot of frequent flyer miles on this new speaking tour. Now, we've got a lot of people watching on television and online. Where are some of the places that you'll be stopping on this tour?
Well, the tour was not organized by me, and that's one of the things that they keep saying in the media, that I have set up a tour of Australia, when actually I was invited there to speak after the people who were organizing the event discovered that I was coming there for a holiday. So they organized this event for me to speak to cities of Melbourne, Sydney, Gold Coast, Brisbane, and Adelaide over the course of about 3 weeks. And then in between times, I was going to be enjoying my holiday. And then I would be quietly getting back on the plane and flying back to the U.S., estimating that maybe I would speak to about 200 people per venue, so maybe 1,000 people out of Australia's 23 million people. And would just, most of those people at that time would probably be like-minded and be very interested in the topic because they feel like it was something that they already knew something about and they wanted some additional information. And it's been the Australian press who's made this into an international uproar of all across the world, actually, because I've been getting calls for interviews not only from Australia, but from Europe and from the EU. So it was not my design to come there and set up this speaking tour. It's just been the result of the pro-vaccine lobbies in Australia have decided that the people of Australia are not entitled to free choice. And if they are entitled to free choice, they can't do it based on any information that I might give them.
Now, I want to get into the Australian media in just a minute, but who stands to gain from keeping you silent on this tour?
The pro-vaccine community. In fact, it's the Vaccine Skeptics Society that started in Australia that, in my opinion, is one of the most rabid pro-vaccine organizations probably on the planet. They've gone after the vaccine network in Australia that has tried to support parents from having free choice. In Australia, their laws are such that parents can simply refuse to do vaccinations, but if they do that, they have to be subjected to counseling by their doctor. And to me, that implies the possibility of browbeating because of the potential for public health concern. But they can refuse to do vaccines if they want to. Probably like the United States, most of the parents there are not aware at the flexibility of their vaccination schedule, and it may very well be that that is what the pro-vaccine community is most concerned about.
Now, the Australian Today show anchor asked if you believe that you are risking public health in children and the elderly. She even attempted to discredit your medical credentials. Do you believe the interview was clearly biased to support their big pharma sponsors?
Well, in Australia, the osteopaths in Australia are not very well thought of. In fact, they are treated as though they were even less than chiropractors. It's very different, and I made a big deal of it during that interview, to the effect that American-trained osteopathic physicians are full physicians. We are trained to be any sort of subspecialty. We can be obstetricians or neurosurgeons, and for myself, my career started out as the director of an emergency department for 12 years. So American-trained osteopathic medical doctors are very different than the rather disparaging way that the Today Show wanted to position an osteopath coming to Australia. So I think that was a big difference that I would assume that most Australian citizens know that, but the media wanted to make a big deal of that.
Now, this topic has exploded in Australia. UNICEF has labeled you an influencer. From your perspective, what does the debate look like here at home? Have you ever endured the same level of attacks here?
No, absolutely not. And thankfully, we have the guaranteed right to free speech that is constitutionally guaranteed for us. And I believe that we're the only country, or at least we're one of the only countries that actually has that. I really feel that what we have seen over the course of the last 14 years that I've been involved in this investigation is that the tide has shifted somewhat here in the States. I believe that pediatricians and physicians are opening their eyes a little bit. We have so many vaccine damaged children now that it's hard to deny that there must be something going on. And could there perhaps be a connection to the multiple doses of 16 different vaccines that children get by the time they're 5 years of age?
Now, Doctor, are you anti-vaccine or are you pro-medical choice?
Actually, I think that that whole label of anti-vaccine is just such a misnomer. We're not necessarily, nobody that's involved in this is anti-vaccine. What we really are is pro-informed choice and pro-education. I sometimes feel like remember Gary, the old broadcaster, Paul Harvey, who used to say, here's the page 2, rest of the story. I feel that what I've been able to put out over all of these years is that rest of the story, the hidden side that is very well published in the medical literatures and in government documents, but is not well known to the community, not even well known to conventional medical doctors. So I'm doing an extensive review of the literature. We promote more than 12, somewhere between 12 and 20 new reports every week that's pulled out of the conventional medical literature that goes into our vaccine research library. And the vaccine research library has accumulated more than 6,000 articles gleaned specifically from only mainstream medical journals that shows the problems associated with vaccines.
Now, parents are constantly told vaccines are safe and they're protective and harmless. Meanwhile, in Italy, Novartis was questioned after 13 deaths arose when their vaccine was taken. Do you believe that vaccines actually carry risks?
Oh, absolutely. And they even admit so on the package inserts. And what the problem is that the pharmaceutical industry downplays the risk substantially. They will say, well, if 78 million people get vaccinated, that could be 78 people by their own statistics with very severe injuries, a lifetime of health problems, even a death. And so you multiply that by each one of the vaccines over a multiplicity of years. There are many, many people at the very low end of the scale by their own admissions that have severe vaccine injuries. In fact, the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program has now paid out more than $2.5 billion in injury claims for people who have been injured by vaccinations.
Now, Kenneth Davis, the CEO of the Mount Sinai Well-Being Program, says that a flu vaccine that would provide protection for an entire decade is close at hand. Meanwhile, the CDC missed the mark with this year's flu vaccine, and now the Albuquerque Journal is reporting that the elderly in long-term care facilities are responding to high doses of the flu vaccine. How do you respond?
Well, I would like to define how they say they are responding. That means that you've injected something into the body and you are developing an antibody. And it's well versed in the medical literature that we don't really know what these antibodies mean. The assumption is that once you have developed an antibody to the vaccine or to the flu shot, that will protect you. We also know that there are many case reports of people that have had 2 or more vaccines and get the disease anyways. So missing the mark from the flu shot happens more often than people think, Gary. In fact, less than 15% of the time does the viruses in the flu shot actually match what's going on out in the circulation. So to say that you can have a flu shot that will last you for 10 years, that could prove to be quite interesting.
Now, on January 1st, on the East Coast, New York City instituted mandatory flu vaccines for all preschool children. On the West Coast, Catherine Flores Martin, the director of the California Immunization Coalition, praised the New York mandate, calling children vectors of sickness. Now, I keep hearing the protest chant in my head, my body, my choice. Should these children or their parents be given a choice?
Absolutely. Particularly since we know of all the vaccines, the one that works the least often is the flu shot. The multi-dose flu shots still have mercury in them. So we are loading these kids back up with mercury. The flu mist, the nasal flu mist, the ones that goes up the nose, we understand that they spread viruses for at least through 3 weeks after that happens. And Gary, the anti-vaccine movement actually had its roots in the first mandatory vaccination law that was passed in the United Kingdom in 1853. And along the time of the people that were to opposing vaccination started at the same time, and it was called Our Baby's Battle. Well, I believe that continuing today, 200 years later, we are still continuing with Our Baby's Battle.
Now, Doctor, back to the Australian blockage or the attempted blockage of your message. Is this a matter of free speech or public health?
The public health side of the equation should be more than just high vaccination rates and low infection rates of a very short list of contagious diseases. Public health should also take into consideration the risks of ADD, ADHD, insulin-dependent diabetes, autoimmune diseases, a long list of neurological conditions that we seem to be missing the point of, is there a connection? And I maintain, and it's my opinion, that there is a connection because I've seen it published in the medical literature. So the public health people who get all up in arms over a very short list of infections that were simply a rite of passage when people in their 50s were growing up, between measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, even pertussis, and in children more than 1 year of age is just a protracted cough. It's not really a deadly disease. And so I believe that we need to be expanding our premise about what public health should be, not only for children, but also for adults.
Doctor, what is next for you on this tour? Will the show go on?
That remains to be seen. The pro-vaccine and the vaccine skeptic people in Australia are mounting a campaign to try to get my visa revoked. I believe that's a bit of a slippery slope for the Australian government, but of course that's up to them. So it remains to be seen. And also the Australian people that are on the other side of the fence, I've gotten thousands, and I mean literally thousands, of emails and Facebook posts of people from Australia saying, we totally support you. We think this is horrible what's happening here. We never even heard of you before, but we believe you should have the right to come here and to just give an educational seminar to help people decide what is in the best interest of the health of their children.
All right, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny, thanks for joining us. We look forward to having you back with an update on this very interesting and controversial story.
Thank you so much, Gary.
All right, that was Dr. Sherri Tenpenny. You can find out more about her and her work at drtenpenny.com. Up next, we've got today's special reports, and Amanda Gabriel is standing by with your daily digital report. You're watching WHDT World News.